Welcome to Fear-Free Childbirth Podcast with Alexia Leachman, the weekly 9-month podcast to help parents-to-be look forward to their fear-free childbirth. Alexia is a pregnancy and head trash clearance coach and the author of Fear-Free Childbirth, How to Have a Stress-Free Pregnancy and a Positive, Pain-Free Birth. As a mum who's had 2 fear-free and pain-free births, Alexia wants to share with you how she overcame her pregnancy and childbirth fears so that you can look forward to having a fear-free birth too. Over the 9-month life of this podcast, Alexia will be sharing some real-life stories from mums and dads, insights into the latest childbirth research, inspiring tales from birth professionals, and some tips and techniques for clearing your fears and stresses. If you would like to receive a free chapter from her book, then head over to fearfreechildbirth.com, where you can also sign up for her email series, How to Have a Stress-Free Pregnancy. But now, it's time for the show.
Hello and welcome back to the Fear-Free Childbirth Podcast. This is me, your host, Alexia Leachman, and thank you so much for joining me today. Now, we are in episode 36 of the podcast. Can you believe it? Actually, I can't. You know, when I started this podcast, I decided that I wanted to do a 40-week podcast because I felt it would be really great to be able to support a pregnant mum throughout her pregnancy. And in my head, I was like, oh, it'll be 1 per week and it'll be beautiful. And so here we are at week 36 and I've got four weeks left. Oh my goodness, where did that time go? I can't quite believe it. And I feel like I have still so much that I want to share with you. And I'm now having to make some very harsh decisions about which episode's going to make it before I run out of time in this current series. So, and yeah, that kind of suggests that maybe I should do another series, like a second season. And I'm just not sure, you know, would I have enough to fill another season of, another 40-week season of a Fear-Free Childbirth podcast? Do you want to listen to more stuff? Are there more things that you'd like to hear more about? Are there other guests that I could be talking to? Are there still questions that you have that you feel are holding you back from having the perfect, not perfect, we can't have perfect, but holding you back from the fear-free birth that you desire? Anything like this, I would love to hear your thoughts. So please come and let me know at alexia@fearfreechildbirth.com, because these are the kind of thoughts that are running around my head right now as I'm trying to wind up the podcast. So do come and let me know. So anyway, today's podcast episode is going to be all about, well, it's going to be about parenthood, which sounds a little bit weird, right? Because this is a birth podcast, but actually, hear me out. What I'm going to be I've got a guest coming on the show today, and she is Ellie Taylor, and she's the author of the book Becoming Us. And what she's going to be talking to us about is that transition phase that takes you from being a woman to a mother. And she defines parenthood, as opposed to parenting, as that shift that happens to you, which means the changes that happen within you, how you feel about yourself, your relationship with yourself, how you make that transition to being a mum. What about your relationship with your other half? How does that work? How do you adapt to now being parents? Is there any preparation work that you can do beforehand? And actually, yes, there is. So while you're still waiting for the little one to arrive, there are things that you can now do to sort of put the grounding down, put some foundations in place so that when the little one does arrive, it doesn't feel so crazy, crazy is the better word I can find, because it does get a little bit crazy in those first few weeks when you've got a little one, with the sleep deprivation and the changes that happen. So this is what I'm going to be talking about on today's podcast with Ellie Taylor. It really, really is very, very interesting. And the reason I decided to get Ellie on the show is because I have had quite a few emails from some of you saying, the birth thing, I'm kind of getting my head around it and I'm okay with that. But actually the bit that I'm terrified about is the bit just after birth, the motherhood bit. And I'm having a little bit of a mini freak out. Can you help? So it's for you ladies that are having a little bit of a freak out about becoming a mum. And this can really contribute a lot to our fears when it comes to giving birth, because actually a lot of that can manifest within the transition phase of labour, because a lot of our deepest, darkest fears can arise at that moment. If you've heard some of the older podcasts in the series, then you'll heard some of the doulas talking about that if we have any unresolved fears that we haven't addressed or dealt with, then they can sort of make themselves known in the transition phase of labour and start causing difficulties for us. And so if one of your fears happens to be fear of becoming a mum, just because it feels so overwhelming and so daunting, then this is a really important one to deal with. And so today's episode is really going to help you to do that. Now, Ellie, who's fantastic, she's got the book, like I said, called Becoming Us. She's also giving away a fab video that you'll be able to get at the show notes for today, which you'll be able to find at fearfreechildbirth.com/parenthood, all one word. So look out for that. And I think once you've heard what she's got to say, you're really going to want to get your mitts on this video. Anyway, before I hand over to that video, to the chat with Ellie, I've just got a couple of things that I do want to run by you before we dive into that really fascinating interview. Now, over the last few weeks, the first thing I've been mentioning quite a bit, that if you want to sign up to my free video training series that is all about helping you to clear your fears around childbirth, then you need to get your name on the waiting list. So I just want to give you an update on that, because I've had a nightmare actually. I hired a video guy and we spent, I hired a makeup artist and all that stuff to do my videos, and I finally got the videos back from him and they're terrible. He didn't use a mic and he should have done, and he didn't use proper lighting, and I've got to do them all again. So there is a slight delay on the video training, but I promise you it's one of the things that's right at the top of my list, and I'm working on it very, very soon. So I'm sorry, but it's going to be a little bit later than I'd hoped. So just to give you a little bit of update, I haven't forgotten about it, because it's one of the most important things on my list right now, is to give you the tools and the ability to be able to clear your own fears so that you can have that positive birth experience that you deserve and that you can have. So that's a little update there. And I've just got a couple of hellos to do as well, actually, because, I do get a lot of emails from listeners, and I love getting emails from listeners. So I just want to say a couple of hellos. And the first one is a little hello to Carmen, who is having what she called a non-baby shower baby shower. And it sounds lovely, because she's asked her friends that are going to come and join her not to give any gifts, but instead to bring a birth affirmation to a little gathering. They're going to do some lovely yoga, and she's asked them all to bring a plate of food to put into the freezer, which is such a great idea. Why didn't I think of that at my baby shower? So hello, Carmen, thank you very much for coming. Email me and letting me know. She did ask me to let her have a little birth affirmation that she could have at the ceremony. So I'm really touched, Carmen, that you asked me to contribute to your own baby shower. That really does melt my heart. So I hope you have a wonderful baby shower. And then also I want to say a quick hello to Gloria. Now, Gloria might not be listening anymore because she's had her baby. She had a lovely, amazing birth, and I'm going to be sharing her positive birth story on the blog, because she truly did have an amazing birth, and she really wanted to share it with me as well and say, look, hey, do you want to share it? But I just want to share a couple of things for her. She said that she had 4 aha moments listening to the podcast, and I thought, well, I'll share this with you, because this might be useful if you're listening to today's show and you're really looking to kind of shift your thinking around the birth that you've got coming up, and really start thinking about it in a really positive way and start looking forward to it. Then maybe you can, maybe by hearing someone else's aha moments can help you to make that shift yourself. So I'm just going to share those with you. For Gloria, her first breakthrough is listening to my hypnobirthing episode with Dr. Ava. And so if you want to look back for that one, and as part of that episode, I shared a YouTube video of a hypnobirth. And so she said looking at that birth really did help her to realise that this is a birth that she could achieve for herself, and gave her something very concrete that she could visualise. And then the second aha moment for her was the due dates episode, all about really helping her to relax around her due date. So if you're not familiar with the due date episode, it's all about recalculating your due date to have a more realistic due date based on science, rather than this very woolly, vague concept that the due date calculation system is based on. So the due date episode was really helpful for her as well. But also, when I shared, there's an episode that I've got, which is what I'd share with you in the weeks or the days leading up to your birth, if you're currently due any day, that episode. And it's really where I encourage you to have a conversation with your baby and thinking about you, your body and your baby as this sort of three beings, three entities that need to work together to help the birth be a very positive and smooth experience. So that was really, really helpful for her. And then finally, it was the episode listening to Sophie Fletcher, who's the author of Mindful Hypnobirthing. And Sophie Fletcher's come up with her own version of hypnobirthing. She's kind of blended a few things together to come up with her own version. And so she felt listening to Sophie's interview was also really, really useful for her. So I hope that hearing somebody else's aha moments is useful for you, because that can maybe help to bring about a shift that's required in your mind and bring about a really wonderful positive birth experience, which is going to be great for you, baby, and of course the family. So anyway, enough of all that. I hope that was useful. Now I'm going to hand over to the time that I spoke to Ellie Taylor, who's the author of Becoming Us, all about the transition to parenthood and parenting. I hope you enjoy it. Well, hello Ellie, and welcome to the Fear Free Childbirth podcast today.
Hello, Alexia, and thank you very much for having me.
Well, thank you for coming on the show. Now, today we're going to be talking about a slightly different aspect of birth preparation, and that's the bit that comes just after the birth, the parenthood bit. And so Ellie's going to help me to talk about that, because Ellie's got a great book called Becoming Us, and she'll tell us all about that. But Ellie, before we start talking about that, the bit that comes just after birth, would you mind just telling the listeners a little bit about, how you came to write this book and a little bit more about who you are?
Yeah, sure. Well, my background is in relationship counselling, and I became a relationship counsellor at about the same time I became a new mother. And so that was very interesting. Let's talk about the new mother bit first. I thought I was really, really well prepared for parenthood. I'm the sort of person that I like to research everything, and I read heaps of books, and we did private antenatal classes, and I did prenatal yoga, and I thought I was really, really, really well prepared. We had a fabulous midwife, and you know what? It all paid off. We had a wonderful birth experience. It was fantastic. But what I found that I wasn't well prepared for was parenthood. And I found, after the fact, in hindsight, that I think we do a really good job of preparing couples for pregnancy and birth, and a really good job of preparing them for parenting. There's lots of advice for parenting, but parenthood's kind of like a big gap in between. And so that was the beginning of researching the book and writing the book and living the book. And now I am an educator. Now I train professionals in my Becoming Us method to help them support the parents in their care.
So when I first stumbled across your work, and the distinction between parenthood and parenting, I think is really interesting, and I never really considered that distinction or that difference before. So would you mind just sort of telling us a little bit more about the difference between parenthood and parenting, so that everyone knows what we're talking about?
Sure, absolutely. And it's kind of one of those things that's hidden in plain sight, isn't it? We just don't think about it. We just take it for granted that they're the same. But I found they're very, very different. So parenting, I think, is my relationship, or our relationship with our bump that we're growing, or our baby or our child. Whereas parenthood, on the other hand, is, my relationship with myself as I grow from a woman into a mother, and my relationship with my husband as he becomes a father. Even my relationship with my own parents, I found my relationship with both my parents changed, in one way or another when I became a parent. Friendships change. My relationship with my community changed when I became a stay-at-home mother. Everything, lots of things changed. And this is what I think is parenthood. It's how we feel about ourselves and those closest to us as we become parents.
Yeah. And I think as well, certainly for first-time parents, where that you're letting go of this kind of part of your life that is very significantly different to what you're about to embark on. And there's a bit of grief going on there. There's a bit of loss. And I think I certainly did this, where you try and cling on to your old life as much as you can. And I think it's only now with kiddie number 2 that I've like accepted that I'm a mum, and I should probably have the mum car and probably do more mum activities and not try and like maintain this single life, not single life, but like kid-free life, you know. And that adjustment is just quite massive. You don't realise, and it hits you like a truck a bit, doesn't it?
It does. It really, and, you know, I relate a lot to what you're saying with, and I think, you know, one of the things that I was unprepared for was exactly how much becoming a mother would affect my self-esteem, you know, and also my sense of identity. You know, who am I, you know, now that I'm at home taking care of a baby and not a career woman anymore, and how much those things left me quite vulnerable, I suppose, and more sensitive. And then how that impacted my relationship with my husband. You know, I love what you just said about a sense of loss and letting go. And that was one of the things that I found early in my research for the book, was that, you know, parenthood used to be considered a rite of passage. And the community came together to support parents in saying goodbye to the old way of life, and to support parents in, you know, upskilling and learn what they needed to know for the new way of life, and then helping them out in practical ways as well. And we've just lost the village. Yeah. You know, we not only do we not prepare parents for what comes after the birth, but we've lost the family, the extended family, often to do the guidance. There's plenty of professionals out there now that do it, which is fantastic. But couples often aren't aware of how much help they'll need in the postpartum period, or what help is out there, and so they tend to struggle. My experience is they kind of try to do too much and try to do it all and try to get back to normal, rather than realising that it's actually the two of them working together to slowly and surely create a new normal for their family.
And let's just talk about sort of the relationship with your other half, your husband or your partner, because that, you know, I think there's a lot of couples that in that first year it's such a seismic shock to the relationship that they maybe haven't anticipated. That, you know, a lot of couples just break down at that point, and some of them unfortunately don't stay together, and it can be a really tough time for couples. And I'm just wondering what kind of how can you what advice can you give to a mum that's pregnant, kind of help ease them through that phase, that bit, in terms of relating to their other half and how they can adjust to that together?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, they say that the first year of marriage is the hardest, but I actually think the first year of parenthood is the hardest. Yeah. You know, you don't really know what you're committing to when you say those vows until you've had kids. So I reckon we should have a recommitment ceremony, you know, like after we've actually made it through the first year of parenthood.
And if you make it through that, you're good to go.
That's it. You're okay. You're set for life. But you know what? You're absolutely right. Something like 92% of parents say that they have more conflict in the first year after baby. And, you know, there's good reasons for that. You know, there's sleep deprivation, there's steep learning curves. You know, there's lots of stresses that, you know, couples aren't prepared for, lots of changes going on. There's bound to be some short tempers and some short fuses. So I actually tell couples that that's really normal and not to freak out. Don't panic. It doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with you or your relationship or your partner or anything like that. It's just the situation, and find ways to work together and support each other through it. And it passes, you know, it does settle down. So when I'm working with couples prenatally, I try to help them to readjust their expectations, because I find parents often don't have experience with a new baby. They might not have friends who've got a young baby, so they don't really have a picture of what it's really like. And so they tend to expect, you know, maybe that it's going to be a walk in the park, but it's not. It's tough going. It's an endurance sport and an adventure into the unknown, all rolled into one. So I let couples know that, you know, things like breastfeeding, you know, have to be learnt by both mum and baby, and can be quite stressful sometimes at the beginning. And partner support and encouragement and understanding is really important. I let them know that settling a crying baby can be quite stressful, especially when it's the middle of the night and doesn't matter what you do, it doesn't seem to work. And so, don't be surprised if you're arguing at 3 o'clock in the morning about whose turn it is to get up and try again, sort of thing. And just let them know that all couples are going through this, that it's normal and that they're not alone. And there's, like I said, plenty of help out there. And don't rush to try and get back to what your idea of normal is, because normal after baby is going to be very different to normal before baby. And you just got to muddle through and work it out as it's on the job training, Yeah.
So what are good things that couples can do then when, because a lot of my listeners are pregnant, and so a lot of them are really thinking about preparing for the birth. So I'm kind of I hate to add more to their plate in terms of preparing for, the parenthood bit, but what, if anything, can they do while they're pregnant? Let's say first-time mums, to try and prepare them and their other half for easing that in a bit, so they can maybe, is it worth them kind of talking about some of this stuff in advance, maybe agreeing how it's going to be, even though it's very difficult to predict how things will unfold, but maybe having some understandings that they discuss beforehand or anything like that? What can they do sort of now?
Sure. There's actually lots of things that couples can do. We call it expecting, but we should call it preparing.
Yeah.
Really, expecting's just a waste of time, there's lots of things that you can do to prepare. I'll tell you the two biggest things that I work on. One is stress relief. Couples often, we've been talking about how stressful parts of those first few months can be. Look, lots of it's joyful too. I don't want to paint a negative picture, because the best thing about being pregnant is the baby, and the baby makes it all worthwhile.
Oh, completely.
But to be realistic, stress relief is really, really important. And so what I get couples to do before the baby comes is to think now and to start implementing now some stress relief strategies that they can use after the baby comes as well. Because sometimes the way we relieve stress before baby isn't actually that family friendly, and so we can't maintain it. Dad might play golf, disappear for a whole day and play golf. Well, mum's not going to appreciate that in the postpartum period. And then if he all of a sudden can't do that and hasn't found something that he can do that's family friendly, then, that's just putting more pressure. So things like doing yoga, meditation, going for a daily walk, swimming, gentle exercise are great. And start making that a habit now, so that by the time the baby comes, you can just pick the baby up and take it with you. So that's definitely one of the big things. The other thing that I work on with couples is about changing their communication style. Sleep deprivation does horrible things to the way people communicate to each other. Yes. it's not pretty.
No.
So I kind of warn couples that if they can be more simple, clear, direct and supportive with each other, and be prepared to communicate in that way, then that can take a lot of pressure off. And it can be uncomfortable for them to do that in the beginning, but they often find it's a huge relief later on, because saying something like, I'm really thirsty, I really need a glass of water, could you get it for me please, is really, you can't get a misunderstanding about that. But sometimes the way we communicate, like you're never there for me, you don't know what I need, often it's
bringing
unclear.
a whole load of stuff, actually, because it's all been bottled up. You bring everything in when all you want is the water, kind of thing, and suddenly it's like, you're never there, and it all comes piling in, and then it gets too emotional, doesn't it then, and then it all breaks down.
Right.
Yeah,
exactly right. So just, sometimes I think new mums have to be really assertive about what they need, because they need to get their needs met so that they can meet the needs of the baby. And so often it means being more assertive with their partner than they're used to being, and maybe that their partner's used to hearing, and it might come across as them sounding a bit bossy, but I always follow it up with, I really appreciate that, or thank you, or that's great, or, you're in this together, and dad or partner's learning as they go as well.
So what about for second or third time mums then? How does that, let's say they kind of, the whole thing's kicking off again, and somewhere mum might be thinking, oh my goodness, this was awful first time round, how am I going to get through this next going through all this again. We really struggled first time. What kind of advice might you have for second or third time mums?
Yeah, well, I actually found that I have 3 myself, so I actually found that both second and third times were really positive experiences for us because we did things differently than first time around. I really, really had the opportunity to reflect on what didn't go well the first time around, and I had postnatal depression too after our first, so enough stuff went wrong that it wasn't good for me. So wanting to avoid that second time around, I had the opportunity to reflect on that, and I made sure that I did things differently, and that I encouraged my husband to do things differently, and put in practice everything that we'd learned. And I actually found having our second baby was a really healing experience for us, and really bonding experience for us, because that helped me to heal from the first time negative experience, but also created some really lovely memories and it's not just us, it's not something wrong with us. It was just that we didn't know what we didn't know first time around, and being able to implement and do things differently second time was really empowering. And then the third time, I would say it was better again. So
wow, so it just keeps getting better.
Yeah. Well, it did for us, and even to the point where 2 of ours are teenagers now, and all the hard work that we put in, which is pretty much in the book, has paid off. And we've found parenting teenagers has been a breeze, because we co-parent really well now. But we had to go through a lot to come to this place. Yeah.
So let's just talk about the book then, because your book is called Becoming Us, and there talks. I bought this and I started devouring it over the summer, and really, really enjoyed your perspective and how you came to write it and all that. So would you mind just sort of talking a little bit about the 8 stages of becoming us and a little bit more about the book? Because I found it really, really helpful to read.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. I appreciate that. So I guess what I noticed, and this is going back to when I was a relationship counsellor. So I was a relationship counsellor for 15 years. And one thing that a relationship counsellor do is take a history of a couple's relationship. And so I've taken couples' relationship histories for 15 years, and I noticed for the couples that had young children, that their stories were very, very similar, and pretty much they were going through the same things at the same time. And so as I tracked that, I found that there was a pattern emerging, and the pattern actually ended up becoming 8 stages of parenthood. Yeah. And so I had a psychology background, and I harnessed my counselling experience and formulated 8 stages of parenthood, which I now teach to professionals to support the couples that they're working with. So the first stage is prenatal preparation, and what couples can do to prepare for the birth and for the baby. And as I said, there's lots that they can do to prepare. And then the second stage is postpartum, gathering postpartum support. I call it nest building. So stage 2 is nest building, and getting a cocoon or a nest set up, and sort of putting the foundations down, I suppose, for the family, and getting mum and dad working together as a team right from the start, and creating a buffer from outside stresses, and just creating a little nest at home. So that's stage 2.
And is that quite a short stage, I guess? Is that like sort of almost like a 40-day stage, or a kind of that immediate aftermath of birth?
Yeah, the third trimester.
Yeah,
that's kind of like the third trimester stage. Yeah. Maybe 6, 8, 12 weeks. I mean, as long as possible, preferably.
Yeah.
But
life
starts to intrude again. Yeah.
Okay.
And then the next stage, I find, reality starts to settle in, and the focus isn't so much on the baby anymore, and it's kind of turning more towards, okay, well, what's happening with life and what's happening with us? And I find that that's really about managing expectations about, well, this is not what we expected, this is not what we thought life would look like. We thought the baby would fit in with us, and actually, well, we're fitting around the baby. We can't just take it with us anymore, and with a massive nappy bag and a huge pram. And so it's very much about adjusting to expectations and adjusting to the reality of life with a new baby, and all the joys and the challenges that come with that. And then the next stage is I call base camp, is kind of setting down some deeper, more solid foundations for life as a family, not life as two individuals that can just do whatever they want anymore, but, have a dependent baby. And so things like building in, good stress relief and good nutrition and, the changing relationships and managing them and managing in-laws and going back to work and all those sorts of wider world kind of considerations that come up at that point after the immediate postpartum period. Yeah.
And so how does I'm just thinking these kind of stages, and it might become more obvious with some of the others, but I guess from this point on they can vary in length depending on the couple and how they kind of deal with stuff or how much they adjust, the speed at which they are adjusting. Is that fair to say? Or
Absolutely. And, like the base camp stage, my husband and I still go back to base camp. Like if we've got sick kids or, something happens and, we need to lick our wounds a bit because life's dealt us a blow or whatever, we'll go back to base camp. And that's just getting back to, preparing nutritious meals and keeping up the stress relief and keeping the lines of communication open. So it's kind of just laying some really solid foundations for when life is going to throw some curveballs or get challenging, as it does for everybody at some point. But it's just setting up that sort of family foundation. But the next one is really pivotal. The next stage I found is managing strong emotions, because what most couples don't realise is that because they're biologically primed, I suppose, to be sensitive to their baby's emotion and to read their baby's emotional signals, that makes them also more sensitive to their partner. And so, I warn couples about this. You're going to be more sensitive to your partner, to your partner, and your partner's going to be more sensitive to you. So just be aware of that and be gentle with each other, and be aware of that when you're communicating, that you are going to be more emotionally vulnerable, and to prepare them that with that sensitivity, the highs are higher and the lows are lower and everything else in between. There's just such a range of emotions that I felt after I had kids. I felt love, like my heart would burst, and this fierce protectiveness, like I could scratch somebody's eyes out if they came too close to my kid, and sometimes so frustrated and sometimes so bored and, stuck at home all day, and just this, real range of emotions. And this is one of those stages that, I love what you just said about if you manage it well, it's not so long, but if you don't manage it well, it can go on forever sort of thing. So I think it's really important for couples to know how to manage it and how to become more comfortable with stronger and deeper emotions, I think, because that's how we bond too. That's how we bond with partner and friends and other mothers, through sharing those emotional experiences.
But I think also, like the emotional life, I'm sort of really into the idea of really working with your emotions and acknowledging them, and but also clearing them and facing up to them and not denying them. Really sort of, if you're feeling something, then feel it and work through it. Don't kind of drown it in alcohol or ignore it or suppress it, because it's just going to come and bite you on the bum. And certainly when you're in a high intensely emotional scenarios, such as one with kids where, like you said, they are primed to push your buttons. They are you, and so whatever is in you that needs to be healed will be thrown back at you 100 times stronger, because they are you. They are you, and so if you don't face up to your own emotional vulnerabilities, your own emotional imbalances, your own all that stuff, if you don't build that emotional resilience early on, it's really going to make that whole parenting journey so much tougher, I think.
It can become very overwhelming, and I think, and get help. You don't need to do it on your own. I think it's really important to be able to talk to your partner about these sorts of things and get help to do that if you can't, because they're going through their own emotional journey. And it's by sharing this stuff with a partner that you just really can become more strongly bonded with them through the experience of parenthood. This is why this step is so pivotal, because this is the step that can either merge couples and bring them closer, or send them further apart if they don't know how to handle the emotionality, or if they try and shut off from it, or if they try and shut down. It's also an important one too, because it's through denying emotions, not being able to express our emotions or get comfort for our vulnerable emotions, that can lead to postpartum depression or anxiety, or can contribute to it. So it's an important one to acknowledge and to share.
And I think, as with anything really, it's just communication is key in these things, isn't it? Communication is often the thing behind success or failure in many ventures, and I think probably dealing with your emotions, communication is a key part of that.
It is, and I think that we need to communicate with ourselves first. So I need to tune in with what's going on inside me and have that conversation with myself. What am I really feeling? What's really going on here? Okay, I'm feeling angry, but if I sit with that long enough, I'm actually feeling sad. And so what would happen if I expressed my sadness to my husband instead of my anger? And how different would that sound, and what would the outcome be? I can rage at him, or I can say, you know what, underneath this, I'm actually feeling really sad and I need you to hug me. And this is what I mean about this postpartum really clear communication, is like, I'm feeling lonely and I need you to hug me. I've been at home all day with this baby and I just need, I need some adult company and an adult conversation and a hug from some strong shoulders. It's about self-awareness and having that conversation with myself, and then being able to articulate that to my partner. And that was the big learning for me and for us, I think.
And I think that journey to self-awareness, again, that is not a quick one, is it? To learn to listen to your feelings, to be able to connect to what you're feeling and be aware of what it is you're really feeling, and not maybe respond to those surface emotions, but those deeper ones is a sort of, I guess it's a lifelong learning, that one, isn't it? You can't just go on a quick weekend course for that one, can you?
No, it's not. But I found that, that this is what I found. I found that becoming a mother kind of forced me to do that, because I left my career identity behind, and I became a stay-at-home mum, and so that gave me a lot of opportunity to work out who I really was and what I really wanted out of life. And I loved being a mum. I loved that identity, but there were parts of it that I didn't like. So it was working out that, okay, this is what I like and this is what I want more of, but this is what I don't like and this is what I want less of, and just, figuring all that sort of stuff out. So I actually found becoming a mother was a really huge opportunity for self-awareness and for growth. And, that's what I did with clients, for 15 years, was facilitate that for them. And then to channel that sort of personal growth for mothers and dads back into the relationship and helping them to share that with their partner. And then that creates some really solid foundations for their family, and it's lovely work to do.
No, it is. So back to the 8 stages then in the book. Then what's the next stage after it was that emotional phase that you've just talked about? What's the next one?
Yeah, so the next one is identity and self-esteem, and we've got some fantastic research coming out now about how becoming a mother and becoming a father changes and affects mums and dads' self-esteem and sense of identity in both positive and negative ways. We know, for example, that dads who are more involved with looking after the baby have higher self-esteem. So I really encourage dads to be involved right from the very beginning. And we know for mums that dad's attitude towards her as a mother can really affect her self-esteem. So if she feels really appreciated and supported and validated by him, then she's going to be feeling good about being a mother. But if he's not supportive, if he doesn't really appreciate the efforts that she makes or doesn't see them, then that can negatively affect her self-esteem. And in some cases that can lead to postnatal depression. So, having a supportive partner is really, really key. That was something that I recognised again in hindsight, that the ways that my husband and I weren't prepared for the normal changes and challenges that I now know are normal changes and challenges, the ones that we were blindsided by, the ones that we didn't expect, the ways that they impacted on our relationship in ways that we weren't able to support each other, and then the negative impacts of that on us in terms of our relationship and our self-esteem. And, that that was a huge challenge for us in the first couple of years until I figured it all out and recognised that it wasn't actually us, that it was just that we were unprepared.
Yeah.
And, you know, a lot of sadness about thinking about, gosh, if we had been prepared for this stuff, what a difference that might have made to our relationship and how we felt about ourselves and how we felt about each other.
And what about in terms of how the parenting of the little one as well, you know, the way that they experience you as parents in those times when there may be conflict and arguments and going on? It's something that, you know, as well as in addition to all the birth preparation stuff, this preparing for parenthood is really crucial, isn't it? Really crucial. And I don't think we hear enough about it.
Crucial. We don't hear much about it at all. And I think of it as pre-parenting. I think of it as supporting mothers and fathers as individuals and as a couple to be cooperative co-parents. Because the thing that my husband and I found is that all the stuff that we were unprepared for, and we were just sort of flailing and struggling through, and it sort of started becoming between us. Well, that affected our ability to co-parent because we were arguing a lot, and that's actually stage 7 is managing conflict. So that's the next stage. We've arrived there. So everything before led up to us just arguing and having this power struggle, I suppose, about just everything. You know, it got to the point where we were arguing about what to feed the baby, or, you know, what time to go for a walk, or, you know, any little thing, because we were just, you know, the tension had built so much by that point. And, you know, I really noticed that when I was unhappy with my husband, it would affect my parenting. You know, I wasn't the best mother that I could be when I was cranky with him, you know, when I was irritated with him. And I'm sure that the reverse was true as well. So you're right, we don't pay this stuff nearly enough attention, but we're starting to. I mean, I know I work with a lot of educators now who are starting to integrate this stuff into their birth preparation classes, which is fantastic to see.
Amazing. So what's the final stage then? I'm hoping it's, you know, enjoy the ride, is it?
Yes, it's how to connect with your partner and stay connected with your partner, and how to reconnect with your partner. And in fact, I've found that there are ways that partners can stay connected through all the stages, and yet if they haven't managed to, if they're at stage 7 and they're thinking, oh my gosh, this is terrible, what's happening to us, then you can reconnect at any time. You know, we most of the time want to be with our partners, and when we explore the ways that we're unprepared for parenthood, that we're not supported, that we're probably taking on way too much and putting way too much pressure on ourselves, and maybe that our expectations were unrealistic in the first place, then we can stop blaming our partner and start to work towards rebuilding, you know, the connection between us. And that's nice work to do as well.
Now, you mentioned earlier on in the chat that you said, oh, you know, we often go back to base camp, or we go back to this stage. So when you're talking about these stages, are they kind of, does one naturally fall into the other, or are you talking about, you know, you can kind of dance between them depending on where you're at? You might fall back into a stage. And can you just talk a little bit more about what you mean about all that when you say you fall back to a stage?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I find that when children change, then I found that we went back through the stages. So when, for instance, the baby's become a toddler, and then all of a sudden you've got all these horrible toddler behaviours. Yeah. You know, they turn into little monsters, and you've got all these horrible toddler behaviours that you've got to deal with. Then the conflict's likely to go back up again. You know, or teenagers, when they go through the teenage stage, the conflict goes back up again. So I go back to expectations. You know, what do we expect of our child? Are they realistic expectations? Go back to base camp, stress relief, eating well, not taking on extra pressures, going back to emotions. Okay, well, what am I feeling now? Okay, I'm freaking out because my toddler's picking their nose at mother's group, and I look like a bad mother or something. But no, you know what? It's normal, and, you know, getting that reassurance from other mothers, and go back through some of those stages. But you know what, this is the thing that I found, is that every time you go back, it's easier to go forward again, and the reconnection comes quicker, the conflict's lowered, you get familiar with your emotions, you know better how to express them. So it's like, you know, you're going forwards even if you're going backwards, sort of thing. Yeah.
Now, it sounds to me like this is the kind of thing that, you know, it's mums usually that listen to the podcast, and I have got a few episodes for Dad, but sounds like we really need to get dads listening to this as well, so that they can kind of get with the program a bit in terms of helping, you know, because I think sometimes sometimes dads are a bit slow to the party on some stuff. Certainly it's mum's doing all the prep in terms of birth stuff, and some dads, they want to be there, they want to support, but they don't kind of jump in with 2 feet all the time. And so I feel that maybe this is something that might be it might be like this as well for the parenthood bit as well. Is that what you find when you're counselling?
Absolutely. I find that dads love my book. I've had just as many dads say that they bought it for their wives as wives say that they bought it for their husbands. So yeah, because I'm big on not blaming. Yeah. I'm big on including dad, and I'm big on inviting dad in. I mean, dads might not jump in, but they also might not be invited in. Like at prenatal appointments, is dad even invited? Often dad's not even invited to prenatal appointments. Often in the postpartum period, dad's battling the mother-in-law and all the sisters and can feel quite excluded from, what's going on postpartum, where that this is back to stage 2, the nesting, where it's really important to give dad plenty of space to find his own way with the baby and to start to establish his own independent relationship with his baby, because that's good for babies, it's good for dad, and it's ultimately good for mum as well. So I'm very pro, very pro dad and pro the whole family.
Well, we've got a great little free download for anybody interested in hearing more about the 8 stages. Ellie, just want to talk a little bit about the video that you've got that people can get hold of to get a bit of an overview of the book, which I think would be the perfect thing to show dad actually as well, because I think dads like a bit of video as well. So just talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's just I think it's a 13-minute video that I've created. It's about the 8 stages, and it just describes the main characteristics, I suppose, of each stage. And I created it for expecting and brand new baby parents, and also for educators to use with prenatal groups or with clients. So yeah, it's hopefully a great resource.
So you can get hold of that free video from the fearfreechildbirth.com website, and I'll share the link at the end of our chat so that you can get hold of that, because I think that sounds like a really great way to just get your head into this whole idea of parenthood, even though right now the listeners are probably just focused so much on the birth prep. Actually, I think it's worth, like we've talked about, to just start really thinking about that period straight after birth as well, and to do what you can now while you've got a little bit more time and no crying babies to distract you, and you've got the sleep and all the rest of it. Hopefully sleep, I say sleep, when you're heavily pregnant, sleep's not always that easy to come by anyway. But so if people want to find out more about your work, Ellie, where can they find out more about what you do in websites and Twitter and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, absolutely. My website's ldtaylor.com, and actually what you're saying about the birth, a lot of couples these days do a birth plan. I really encourage couples to do a postpartum plan. Ooh. And I actually have a postpartum or a nest building plan on my website at ldtaylor.com. So if they sign up for that, they can get that as well. Oh. I'm on Twitter, I think it's Ellie Taylor at Becoming Us or something like that. I'm on Facebook, I'm on LinkedIn, if anybody's on LinkedIn. And but the website, ldtaylor.com, is probably the best place to start.
Oh, well, thank you. I'm going to have all those links in the podcast show notes. And I just want to thank you, Ellie, for coming on the podcast and sharing this, just opening up the world of the parenthood piece, which I think a lot of people maybe don't fully consider or appreciate, and it completely knocks them for six when they do become parents. And I know that a lot of my listeners, some of them, they feel like they've got the birth thing covered, and some of the emails I'm getting from people is like, it's the bit straight afterwards, am I going to be able to be a good mother? It's that piece. So I think it's been a really useful, interesting, fascinating conversation that we've had today, and I think my listeners are really going to appreciate it. So thank you once again for coming on the show, Ellie.
My pleasure. Well, people say nothing can prepare you for parenthood, but that's not true anymore. So
your book can. Thank you.
My pleasure, Alexia. Great to talk to you.
Well, I hope you enjoyed listening to Ellie and what she has got to say about that transition into parenthood and parenting. I certainly found it really interesting. And when I read her book over the summer, it was a real eye-opener for me. So I would definitely recommend that you check out the book. But if you're still not sure, then get the download. The download for today's episode, you can find it at fearfreechildbirth.com/parenthood. And the download is I think it's a 14-minute video that Ellie's created for parents, new parents, parents-to-be, and the educators that help other parents in her method. And it just summarises the 8 steps that we talked about during our chat. So probably a really good one to sit down and watch with your other half if you can't get them to listen to the podcast episode. So I hope that you found today's episode useful. And remember, I still want to hear from you about whether or not I should do a season 2 for the podcast. So do come and email me at alexia@fearfreechildbirth.com and let me know your thoughts. Thanks for that, and I'll see you next time. Bye for now.
Thank you for tuning in. You've just been listening to Alexia Leachman from the Fear Free Childbirth podcast. If you enjoyed the show, she'd really love it if you left a review on iTunes or Stitcher, or shared it with a friend. And don't forget, to get a free chapter from her book, head over to fearfreechildbirth.com to get your copy, as well as finding other episodes in this podcast and more about how Alexia can help you with pregnancy and birth preparation coaching. Until next time.